Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Jared and you're watching Keen Reads. Today I figured I've been accumulating a couple books, not a ton over the last month or so, but I figured I'd show you what I've got and give a little shout out to the places that I got them. Before I get started, I just want to let you know what I kind of have in works for this channel. So I have two ideas that I'm working on in the background, trying to get set up. One of them, like I've been alluding to before, is going through some of my favorite passages and talking about what they mean to me. So that's a video that I will have coming up soon, hopefully. And then another one that I have coming up is going to be looking at and ranking literary traditions. So French, German, Russian, things like that. Kind of evaluating what I've read in each tradition and I guess kind of ranking them. I think it'll be a kind of a fun idea for a video. But getting back to today's video, like I said, I have a book haul. I'm going to show the books, not in the order I got them, but by location. So we'll start with Rust Belt Books, which is in Buffalo, New York. And I got 2 books of theory and then 2 Shakespeare books. The first book of theory is Practicing New Historicism by Catherine Gallagher and Stephen Greenblatt. So I've read The Will and the World by Stephen Greenblatt. So he's he's a Shakespeare guy, but he's also kind of one of the founders of New Historicism, which is the idea that history and literature are interconnected. So basically, you can't look at a text in isolation from the context that was surrounding its writing. That literature has an impact on history, and history has an impact on literature. So I've read a couple, probably three kind of introductions to literary theory. I have a general idea of most of the major theories. However, I'd like to dig a little bit deeper. So I'm thinking about getting a book on each of the major movements. So I have New Historicism. Other things would be like Marxism, post-colonialism, feminism, New Criticism. I think that's what it was called. The one that was around like the 1910s, where I think it was started, or Russian formalism, I think is what I'm thinking of. So get a book on kind of each one to dig a little bit deeper. So this is starting that journey of New Historicism. And then I also got a book by Jonathan Culler on deconstruction theory and criticism after structuralism. So deconstruction is a theory that's a little bit confusing to me, but I think it has more to do with the ambiguities of text and meaning, and kind of looking at the connotations of words and seeing how that affects meaning in the given text, things along those lines. But again, that's why I bought a whole book on it, so that I can dig a little bit deeper. Jonathan Culler actually wrote one of the books that I read on literary theory called A Very Short Introduction to Literary Theory. It's the only book in that series I've read, A Very Short Introduction series. There's a couple of them. Actually, there's a lot of them, but that's the only one that I've read in that series. Next, I got 2 Shakespeare books. So the first one is The Age of Shakespeare by Frank Kermode. I'm guessing this is just, again, talking about Elizabethan context. I guess Elizabethan and Jacobean, since he was publishing also in the reign of King James. Not sure how much new stuff I'll read in this, just because I've read a couple books similar to this, at least if it is what I think it is. However, I was interested in the author Frank Kermode, more his criticism than, I guess, kind of like a history book. He was recommended to me for his criticism by another booktuber, Walt. So plan to get some more books by him eventually. We'll get them on eBay because I think they're pretty rare. But when I saw his name, I just picked this up. The other book I got from Rust Belt Books is a pretty big one. Size, not length. And that is Shakespeare for All Time by Stanley Wells. Really a beautiful book. It has illustrations throughout and pictures and things like that. Actually, mostly illustrations. Actually, both. And I believe that this is, like it says, for all time. And it talks about Shakespeare's influence after Shakespeare's life, is my understanding. So just flipping through, it has a lot of pictures from various productions of Shakespeare's plays throughout the year. And I think this should be pretty unique in the Shakespeare books that I've read so far, in that it's not necessarily about Shakespeare, but his reception throughout the centuries. So looking forward to reading this one. Very beautiful book. Next, we'll talk about two books I got on eBay. Got these last month, and they're pretty straightforward. Northrop Frye on Shakespeare. So Northrop Frye is a famous literary critic and theorist from, I want to say, the 1950s and 60s. But this is just his book, a collection of his essays on Shakespeare. So that's pretty straightforward. And then another kind of biography-ish book. It doesn't have the dust jacket because I got it on eBay, so you never know what you're going to get. But this is Shakespeare by Emma Smith. I'm pretty sure I've listened to a couple podcasts with Emma Smith on the history of literature, but she's just another Shakespeare, not just another, but she's a Shakespeare scholar. And this book is not necessarily a biography of Shakespeare. It's more going through his plays and looking at the ambiguities in the plays, I believe, and I guess the gaps that are present in some of the plays and the history surrounding the plays. So more of a history of the plays, I believe, rather than a history of Shakespeare. I just noticed there's a price tag on this, but I'll take that off later. Last up, I have 3 books that I got from West Side Stories. There's their bookmark. I don't have a bookmark for Rust Belt Books. I don't know if they have one. But West Side Stories is literally right across the street from Rust Belt Books. So whenever I stop at one, I have to stop at the other. They're both great bookstores. I was surprised that I found these books at West Side Story. But the first one is Johnson on Shakespeare. It's kind of hard to read. This is an old copy. This is a collection of essays that Samuel Johnson wrote on Shakespeare, obviously. Compiled by Sir Walter Raleigh. When's this book from? (1959), and I think it was first published in 1908. But obviously compiled a long time ago by Walter Raleigh, assuming that's Sir Walter Raleigh. No, it is not. Just kidding. Sir Walter Raleigh lived before Samuel Johnson. So this is a modern Sir Walter Raleigh, who compiled these essays in 1908. But it looks like there's notes on all the plays, as well as a preface to Shakespeare itself, written in the 1700s by Samuel Johnson, famous literary critic and theorist. This is the first primary work I've had by Samuel Johnson. I've never read anything that he's written. I've also never read anything about him. I've just heard about him through the various media that I consume about literature. I do have 2 biographies of him. One I showed in my last book haul, which is a modern biography, and then one is the James Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, which is kind of a contemporary biography of him. So excited to finally eventually dive into Samuel Johnson, whether that's through his primary works in this novel or in this collection, or the biographies that I have. The last 2 books that I got are actually volumes 1 and 2 of Harold C. Goddard's The Meaning of Shakespeare. Again, similar to Northrop Frye on Shakespeare, as well as Johnson on Shakespeare. This is Harold C. Goddard's criticism and opinions on all the plays. Well, most of the plays. Just counting up on the bottom, it lists the plays in each volume. There's 34 there. I think when I was reading, it has 37, so maybe they're not all listed on the covers. I'm just looking real quick. I don't know. But I've actually never heard of Harold C. Goddard before. But after picking these up, I was reading about it online, and it looked like Harold Bloom, who's another Shakespeare lover, put him in the same tradition as like A.C. Bradley, Hazlitt, Johnson, and all of those guys. So that's pretty high praise. So I was glad that I picked these up. I got them for pretty cheap. Again, that was at West Side Stories. So just a little plug for 2 of my favorite bookstores in Buffalo, West Side Stories as well as Rust Belt Books. Always love going into those stores, specifically Rustwell Books. I never know what I'm going to find. They do have a large literary theory and criticism section. There were so many books that I wanted to get. They had a book on Moby Dick, some of Samuel Beckett's work on Proust, but I just told my wife I'm trying not to spend as much money on books, so I didn't pick them up. But those two books that I got specifically on theory are two that I've been wanting for my collection. Even though in my last library tour, I said I'm not really going to expand my literary theory shelf. But we all know how that happens. We have good intentions when it comes to not buying books, but the heart wants what it wants. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you're looking forward to those other videos that I talked about at the beginning, and thanks for watching.